Hello everybody and welcome to another tier list video where today I am going to be doing something that YouTube has actually requested for a while, which is ranking all of the random basic weaknesses for how spooky, scary they might be. So this one is actually probably harder to kind of put into a general sense for each of these random basic weaknesses. Because, for example, a card like Self-Destructive, all the way down here, hurts a Seeker a lot less than it hurts a Guardian, right? That's the kind of the very nature of these random basic weaknesses. Sometimes they're totally fine, and then for some builds, they're an absolute nightmare. So they're kind of hard to put into a sense of how scary or tough they might be in a general sense. So that's kind of why we haven't really done a video like this, because it's kind of just hard to sum that up quickly and elegantly in a way without having to cover a million different, points for why it is that way, you know? But I'm going to try. I'm going to look at these kind of as the general most awful sense that I can picture in my head when it comes time to reviewing these. I have a tier list that follows the same kind of format as our Treachery and Monster. We have at the weakest tier, wait, this is actually fun? This is a fun basic weakness? Yes, they do exist. This is fine. These are basic weaknesses that you draw and you're like, that's fine, that's okay. This is bad. This is absolutely awful. And oh no, I am going to die. So those are our 5 tiers that we have going on here. And I think that it's time to go through this. Yeah. All right. So once again, I'm going to kind of look at these from a broad, what is the worst that I can kind of just think of on my head, or in situations that I have been in of why they may, be so spooky, scary skeleton. So let's start with Amnesia. So choose and discard all but one card from your hand. So a lot of it comes from my own personal, how much I wish I could not have this weakness. And Amnesia is going to be this is absolutely awful sort of basic weakness. Cards are great. Cards are one of, if not, the strongest resource in a card game. So losing all the cards in your hand sucks. Especially when you it can come at any time, but I can't play my cards because cards cost resources, or I don't want to use them in ways that is worse, right? I don't want to use them in ways that are low value just to fight the amnesia, but maybe it's better to have them lose value, and just play them so I don't lose them to amnesia. And you're kind of living in fear of amnesia, and there's not really a way to save yourself from it apart from just playing the cards or going no hand, right? And it sucks. It sucks to see you lose all cards in your hand. Well, all but one. You gotta keep one, thankfully, right? Which is a plus, but it doesn't make the card feel any better. Now, of course, there are times when you draw Amnesia and it's you had 3 cards in your hand. And you're like, I don't care. Or you had 1 card in your hand. I don't care, right? It still doesn't make the worst case scenario for Amnesia any easier to deal with, right? It sucks to lose your whole hand. It sucks to lose your whole hand. Now, notably, the next one, Paranoia, discard all of your resources. I think this one is an entire tier below the Amnesia. Mostly because when you lose all your resources, you still have your whole hand of resources, right? So let's say, for example, you lose all your resources, but then you can just play a card that gives you more resources. If you lose your entire hand, are you going to keep the card that draws you more cards? Potentially, right? But it's just worse to lose to lose your hand versus lose all your resources, because you're probably spending your resources more commonly. And rather than like being able to get through your hand, you are more often at less resources than you are at less cards in your hand, generally. Now, of course, I've actually had Paranoia in a big money deck, and that sucks. However, you can play around it. Bryn gave me a bunch of advice for how to play around it next time. You use like investments. It's a way to like counteract it. Don't spend all your economy. Alter your deck a bit, like kind of go to a more spendy big money as opposed to a hoarding big money. There's ways to play around it, but it is by no means a good, like an easy weakness. I think that it is a bad weakness still, and it still sucks to see. It's less bad than seeing Amnesia, but it's still very, very manageable. Sorry, it's still very bad, but more manageable than Amnesia. Haunted. Add Haunted to your threat area. You get -1 to each of your skills. This is fine. This is fine. Realistically, most of your skills, you're not using all of your skills, right? Most of the time, you're not using all of your skills. There's going to be times where it sucks, but overall, you can probably get by with the -1 to each of your skills and then just get rid of it when you have a downtime, right? Or someone can get rid of it when there's downtime. I think that this is just a totally fine basic weakness, and I actually can't even really think of a time where it caused me to lose. Or like even like lose tempo. You know, like maybe you fail a skill test or two, but a double action weakness is really easy to get rid of, and I think that this is just a fine kind of, it kills a draw and kills 2 actions, and that's totally okay. Psychosis. After you take 1 or more horror, take 1 direct damage. As a double action, discard Psychosis. Honestly, this one is also pretty fine. And like the reason for that is, how often are you going to take damage that... Sorry, after you take horror and you're going to die to it. Or like how often... If you let yourself get killed by Psychosis outside of windows of like Psychopomp's song in Dunwich, that's kind of on you, in all fairness. You know, I'm even going to say that for Hypochondria. I have to take a damage, take a direct horror. It's also fine. This certainly can change if you are like you get this one, you're the goon, like you're Silas Marsh, for example. You're the goon, you have 9 meat, you're built to take meat, but you also then have to take direct horror. Another one this could be scary with is Daniela, right? But even then, you're the goon. You're going to have time to clear this out, right? Like, or someone will be able to clear it out for you. It's a very manageable basic weakness. Mob Enforcer. 4/3/3 enemy. Bearer only. Hunter. Spend 4 resources. Parlay. Discard Mob Enforcer. I think that this guy is also kind of just fine. I think he's also, like, he's very manageable. He can show up at the wrong time, and he kind of sits more in the this is bad tier. Like, he is a scary enemy, but I think someone, either the goon can kill him, or you just spend 4 resources and get rid of him, right? Because then it's kind of basically like a Paranoia. I mean, maybe it's on par with a Paranoia. You know what? I'm gonna bump it up. I'm going to bump it up. Mostly because it's basically a Paranoia. It's a Paranoia that takes an action. Because most of the time, Paranoia is going to make you lose 4 resources, but you can also solve it. I think that like it lives in between them, right? Like, it's kind of tough to put it, but my gut feels like it should kind of be in the this is fine tier. But it also is kind of very similar to Paranoia, right? This is why I don't want to do this. This is why this video is taking so long, because it's hard to kind of like put these into a traditional kind of tier list metric, you know? But man, Metroid Man, you give me the, I'm gonna quote you on this, because that's a good point. To put it in the this is fine. Paranoia destroys more decks than Mob Enforcer. I agree with that, and that's why we can put it in the this is fine. Silver Twilight Acolyte. 2/3/3, bearer only. After it attacks you, place 1 doom on the current agenda. So even though this guy is actually, like, his stats are easier than the Mob Enforcer, I think this guy is actually a bad one. This one's bad. It's not terrible, but it's bad. If this guy ever gets to attack, see you later, right? If you're ever in a situation where this guy is able to attack, you've lost you drew an Ancient Evils, right? Because it goes on the current agenda. If it went on him, this card would be a lot more manageable. But because it goes on the agenda, that's a little bit, dare we say, poop soup. Which makes this guy, like, I think a bad weakness. Like, most of the time, he's very manageable. He's still just, like, on average, a 2-action weakness. If you're using a gun, it sucks. You have to spend a bullet on this guy. But it's... I don't think it's absolutely awful because, you know, you just kill him, right? Like, just kill the guy forehead, right? But there are windows where he can be awful. Just absolutely awful. But I think he leans more on the this is bad over the awful part. Summer Detective. 3/2/2, bearer only, hunter. While he's at a location, treat your investigator as if his or her printed text box were blank. So... Fun fact about Stubborn Detective is he makes everyone at his location their text box blank. Everybody. Everyone. This is like one of the few weaknesses. There are more of them. But that it actually hurts everybody. Most of the time, this won't matter. Most of this time, this won't matter. If you're Charlie Kane, it matters. If you're Charlie Kane, it matters. If you're like Nathaniel Cho, it might matter. Like, you'll have to just like punch this guy twice. He becomes like a double action ally. But the thing is that it affects everybody else. And I think that in that case, I think he affects enough of a board state that he can like cause some things to blow up. He's in here because honestly, most of the time, this guy does nothing. He just eats an attack from a weapon, right? But I think it's gonna be in the this is bad. No, I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm gonna put him in this is bad. This is tough, right? Like, it's tough. My gut says this guy's fine because most of the time I see this and I'm like, you know, like that's easy. But then, like, you get him in action, and suddenly you're without a character, right? I don't know. I think I'm going to put him in This Is Bad. This guy might be able to live up here, but... like, these are so hard to put into perspective, right? And yeah, him having 2 health makes him much more manageable. But I think there's enough situations, like, even just, like, Charlie Kane... like, if you're playing a 4-player deck and one person has this in their deck, your Charlie Kane is going to, like, they're going to literally try to be as far away from you as physically possible. Like, they never want to be in the same location as you, ever, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. But I think I'm going to throw him up here because I'm more upset about seeing him than I am about seeing these ones. Indebted. You start the game with 2 fewer resources. I don't care. This is fine. I get it. I get the indebted. I get indebted, and I'm honestly actually happy, right? Like, this is even pretty close to the wait this is actually fun tier. Because I get to, like, play the game. You know what? We're going to add a new tier. We're going to add a new tier above this. Add a row above. I'm happy to get this. Let's go like that. And I think we're going to put this one in here. I'm happy to get this weakness. It is a very boring weakness, right? Because you now know what your basic... The scary things about weakness is that you can draw them, right? And it eats a draw at one point in your game. Indebted doesn't. It just like is like, I guess I'll run like, I'll get a bit more economy in my deck as I upgrade. I'm happy to get indebted, and you shouldn't like be happy to get a basic weakness, but I'm happy whenever I roll an indebted. Put internal injury into your play area, into your threat area. At the end of your turn, take a direct damage. Discard discard internal injury as a double action. This is also in par with Chronophobia. Yeah, these are also both just fine. Yeah. Like, if you die to this, that's on you. Like, you can't even, like, unless you draw, like, the only time this card can, like, kill you is if you choose to draw from your deck when you only have one of these left as your last or second last action, and you haven't seen it yet. In which case, why are you drawing from your deck? This card basically just says you're going to take a damage or 2 or a horror or 2 for Chronophobia, and then you're going to get rid of it, or someone's going to get rid of it. Yes, Bryn has died from an internal injury, but that doesn't make internal injury a scary basic weakness, in my opinion. I think this card is incredibly manageable, and you'll be totally fine when you get it. This one is pretty close where I'm happy to get this. Like, a lot of these are like, but I think they all have a negative enough effect that impact it. I don't think there's going to be a lot that get into this tier, to be honest. I'm happy to get this tier. Overzealous. Let's go! Draw the top card of the encounter deck, and that card gains Surge. It's a tough basic weakness. We're not gonna beat around the bush and pretend it's not, right? We're not gonna just sit here and be like, yeah, overzealous is easy. But I'm honestly, actually, for overzealous, I'm living between these two tiers. But I think I gotta give the respect that overzealous deserves. I am not happy when I see overzealous. But I mean, like, it's like overzealous is at its worst when you draw it pre-Mythos phase shift, right? Like, it's fine, like, when you get it, like pre-act flip or agenda flip, right? When you draw it during your turn, it also can be bad, especially if you draw it during your last action, right? I mean, I think it's a bad basic weakness. Like, it hurts, right? But I don't, like, that's the thing. Like, I think it's, like, more in this tier. Like, that's the thing, right? Where I don't think it's by no means fine, right? It's by no means a fine basic weakness. But I think I'd rather have overzealous than amnesia in my decks. Right? I think I would. And yeah, this one does change a lot depending on the campaigns, right? Like, I would hate to get this one in Innsmouth. Innsmouth has a pretty tough encounter deck. If I get this in Dream Eaters, I'm not scared, right? The Dream Eaters is like the softest encounter deck you can even imagine. Like, if you draw this and you get like Foot Bad Hypnos and you're like, I don't care. But then, like, and there's some campaigns. Like, I think Innsmouth is, like, a hard one. Scarlet... I haven't played enough Scarlet Keys to know. I probably wouldn't want it in Carcosa. Carcosa has some tough cards. But overall, you should be fine most of the time, right? Like, I think it's one of those things where it's like Ancient Evils. When you start the game, Ancient Evils is, like, impossible, right? And then it gets easier and less scary the more you play the game. The better you are at handling the threats, the better your tempo is. It kind of like follows the same path as overzealous. Now, another thing that overzealous is that if Bryn has used it as the replacement effect, where it's like, I don't want this weakness, I want overzealous instead, then you know that there's worse stuff than overzealous. Okay. I think that one's going to be pretty contentious, but I think I'm happy with this. My gut says that overzealous this is bad, but I'd rather have overzealous than amnesia, like 90% of the time. Drawing the sign. Put drawing the sign into... Oh, that's actually a great point. Let's go back. All of these weaknesses, they go up in value if you're going to be cycling through your deck a lot. Like, basically, you could probably bump all of these up a tier, depending on, except for indebted, how much you're drawing through your deck, right? Overzealous can probably, like, everything kind of can bump up. Most of them can bump up a tier if you're cycling through your deck a lot. All of these are with the assumption that you're drawing them once, maybe twice, because I don't want to bring Amanda Sharp into this. I've seen an Amanda overzealous, and we still won. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, they get worse, but it by no means... I'm not going to talk... I think it's a fair point, because there are decks that cycle. Like, Patrice, with a lot of these, go up in value as well, right? Like, up in their negative value. But we're treating these as if we draw them once, maybe twice. I think just to like kind of get like a broad floor for these cards. All right, drawing the sign. Put drawing the sign in your threat area. Your maximum hand size is reduced by 5. While checking your hand size during the upkeep phase is double action, discard it. I think this card is also kind of bad. Because it's kind of like basically doing a bad impression of amnesia, but losing cards is still crappy, right? Because this card basically says, choose and discard all but 3 cards from your hand, right? But the problem is, it doesn't go away. It stays there, right? Sometimes I'm happy to see this card, right? Like if I don't have a lot of hand size in my deck. That sounds awful, Metroid Man. Draw the yellow sign that's been filled because you already have the king in yellow. Take 2 horror, need to fetch drawing the sign out of your deck. That does sound like a catastrophe. I think it's less bad than amnesia because you got to keep 2 additional cards. But I think that anything that like interacts with your hand size is bad, not good. Yeah. The thing that follows, location farthest from you, bearer only. When the thing that follows will be defeated and instead shuffled into its bearer's deck. I hate this card. It's so manageable. It's so manageable. But you get to draw it tons of times. I think I'm going to put this one in the this is bad. And it's not bad because of the stats on the enemy, right? It's not bad because this guy is going to deal you damage and horror. The bad is that this guy is going to be eating draws from your deck. It's going to be drawing cards out. It's going to be like making you draw less cards, and that sucks. It's like Finn's weakness, the caught red-handed, where you just always get it over and 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 over again. That's going to be the similar case thing. This goes up even more when the map is teeny tiny. Yep. I don't think like it's like... I think it's just bad because you see it so many times. Dark Pact. Deal 2 damage to an investigator location. When the game ends or you are eliminated, if Dark Pact is still in your hand, remove Dark Pact from your deck, search the collection for Price of Failure, and add it to your deck. Okay, I'm going to be honest, I've had this one a few times, and it's fun. I actually really like Dark Pact. It's a really fun, flavorful, cool, basic weakness. When the flip side, when it turns into the other version, which I actually do not have images of the other versions in this, because we're just assuming it could happen, it's pretty spooky. I think it's a well-designed weakness, but I do think it's also leads to a lot of situations where it's spooky. So, like, people have to go out of their way and play inefficient turns to play around it, which is a lot more than what these ask for. Stab Preston. I love Dark Pact, though. It's very close to the wait this is actually fun tier, but that's saved for, like, one card. Yeah, Dark Pact. Good card. Good card, but I think it's in the bad tier. It's a tough one. Doomed. All right. Chat, you ready for the only one that's going to go up here? Oh no, I'm going to die. What the hell were they thinking when they designed Doomed? So take a horror in your campaign log, record your investigator's earn story assets weakness, record the Doom approaches. If it's already recorded, remove Doom from your deck and put a Cursed Fate. Next one deals 2 horror, and then it records like the time is near or the bell tolls, and then you draw it again, and then you put in the final one, and then if you draw that, it kills you. What the hell were they thinking with this card? I played this 2 or 3 Mondays ago in a 4 scenario campaign, and I am going into the last scenario with the kill card in my deck. A 4 scenario campaign! 4 scenarios, and it's going to kill me. That is inexcusable design. That is not good. That is bad. That is a bad time. They should not have put the upgraded version into your deck. They should not have put the upgraded version into your deck. They should have just let Sleeping Dogs lie and been like, next one's going to be spooky. This is the worst weakness in the game. This is easily the one weakness that if people remove from their pool, I'm not going to be upset at all. Like I'll agree. I'll do it as well. Stupid card. Very bad. Oh no, I'm going to die. 13th Vision. Investigator's location, fail ties during skill tests. Hey. It's like, 13th Vision is like, hey, can I copy your homework? Yeah, but don't make it too obvious. These are like the exact same card, but it affects everybody. I mean, I still think that this card is overall just fine still. Like, it basically just makes everybody... like, it makes everybody a little bit worse, like -1 to all their stats in the encounter deck, like in the Mythos phase, but it's basically just this card. It's basically just the 13. It's just basically Haunted, but for everybody. The Tower. These damn tarots. I'm also kind of over the tarot card weaknesses, to be honest. I think they would be totally fine. I hate how they eat a card in your mulligan. 13th Vision is the one I always leave in play, then die to it. That's happened to me, man. But that's that's our own fault, so we can admit that, right? That's on us. I think that this one's ultimately fine. Like, even in a skill card deck, like, even if you're playing a lot of skill-based decks like I do, this one is totally okay. This one's totally fine. Because it's like you're gonna have you're gonna have the resources if you're a skill-based deck to probably play this, and if not, you can take the time to save up and get there. I don't think it's bad. I think the worst part about it is that it eats a card in your opening hand. That sucks. Like I understand why the flavor of the tarot and the design space of like having evil tarots is like too good to pass up, but it sucks. And that's like the worst part of the Tower, is that it can eat a card in your opening hand, and that sucks. Self-centered. Okay, it puts into your threat area. Multiplayer only. You cannot commit cards to other investigators' skill tests, affect other investigators with player card effects, except aspects that cause damage or horror. Double action, discard self-centered. Even though that this one has actually caused me pain and caused me to like lose tempo, I am also still happy to see self-centered. Because it really does nothing most of the time, right? Like, it just kind of does nothing. I don't think it falls into the weight this is actually fun tier. But it's close. It's close, but I'm happy to get it self-centered. I want to get this in Carson, yeah, and then never remove it. That could be a fun challenge for one of the patron play-along leagues where every investigator has a permanent self-centered. That could be a fun little challenge. All right, Kleptomania. Put Kleptomania play in your threat area as an action to control of an item, asset, or 2 resources from another investigated location, then shuffle Kleptomania onto your deck. At the end of your turn, take 1 horror. This might... I don't know if this is going to be controversial or if people are going to agree with me on this, but I actually think that this one is... It's close to absolutely awful. And I think I'm going to trust my gut and I'm going to put it up there. Because this is what my gut says. I think that this is an absolutely awful basic weakness. At first, I was happy to see it because it's kind of funny, right? My complaint about self-centers that someone vague on what you can or can't do. Agree. Yeah, agree 100%. But I feel like that's an Arkham rules problem. Definitely for sure. Why does it reshuffle? Like, why? Why would they do that? It should just discard. If it discarded, it would be okay. Like, I understand the idea is that you're gaining something out of it. Just make it a double action. Just make it a double action. Because someone's going to lose something. And there's going to be a point where this is going to, like, kill you quicker than this. Because, like, this will come back. And it's going to keep coming back. It's probably really in the this is bad tier. So I'm going to move it down there after, like, sitting on it for a bit. Because I don't think... I'd rather see... and honestly, I'm unhappy with either of them, to be honest. I think I'm going to put it in the this is bad, though. I don't know how many are going to go into the this is absolutely awful. The recursion on this is so bad, though. I think I'm going to put it in the absolutely awful. Let's go. We're going to put it in the absolutely awful. It's a tough weakness. It's fun. It's flavorful. It's really cool. But then you play with it and you see it like for your 3rd time and you're like... And like other people, you know? It is weirder than acid. You can feed it to someone's servitor. That's kind of sick. That's kind of cool. Narcolepsy. Okay. Put Narcolepsy play in your threat area. You cannot take actions, trigger abilities, or play cards as an action. Wake up. After you take damage or horror, discard Narcolepsy. Yeah, you can discard them from play. You can't discard them from your hand, but you can discard them from your play area. Okay. So, 4 players. This is just, like, totally fine, right? Like, in 4 players, someone is going to wake you up. In 3 players, it's annoying, but someone can probably wake you up. In 2 players, what the fuck? What the fuck? I might catch some strays for this, but this card's also going up here. This card can eat 3 actions. This card can eat 3 of your actions in 2-player. If, like, once again, like, it could, like, it depends on the kind of thing. It's probably realistically, I'm going to, like, put it up here as I just start talking. Because, like, in 2 players, this card can be really tough, right? Yeah. Yeah, or can eat none and take a damage in the Mythos. It's true, but I've actually lost a scenario because of Narcolepsy. I've not lost a scenario due to any other random basic weakness. I think Bryn got trauma from Narcolepsy once, which was really funny. He fell asleep, right? Can you imagine? This is in your basic weakness pool. You're playing Circle Undone opening scenario and you draw it on the first turn. And, like, you're just gone. You're just, like, you're just sleeping for, like, the first, like, 3 turns of the game. Because all you're drawing is those Mythos cards that go into your threat area. I'm going to move this belongs in the this is bad tier, you know? I mean, enemies will wake you up if you draw an enemy. This card actually, depending on RNG, can make you lose multiple turns in a row, which is kind of wild. Like, if you notice that not many of these actually like can eat an entire turn of actions, most of them sit at like 2 turns. This one has the potential that if things just go bad, it could be it for you. You could just stay sleeping forever, which would actually honestly be really funny to see. If that ever happened to somebody, I think I would start laughing. Like, could you imagine you get Mythos tests, but you pass all of them. You don't draw any enemies. You can't, like, you're split up on the board. You can't go help people. And then you're just like, that would actually be funny. This is absolutely awful is just from my own personal experience, where I think that I don't think it's a fine one. Because it can be bad, but it also can just do nothing, right? Like, it also can just do nothing. But I don't think I'd rather see any of these than Narcolepsy in 2 players. In 3 players, it's probably fine. 4 players, it's probably fine. But I'm going to put it in where my personal experience is, because this is my tier list, not your tier list. So I'm putting it in that this is bad. If you know when the scenario allows it and 2 players just stick together? Well, yeah. But I mean, like, what if, like, that's the case for all of these weaknesses. Yeah. But, like, what if you get it at the wrong time and it causes things to just go off, right? Like, no other basic weakness apart from, like, maybe overzealous can, like, cause things to go off the wheels like that, right? Like, it's not fine. It's like it actually can just be bad, but I don't think it's absolutely awful. I think that's my own personal experience. It's awful, but if I take that away, my bias from that, it's going to be this is bad. Your worst nightmare. Oh God, honestly, they need to stop making basic weaknesses. Basic weakness design has been kind of, I think, has gotten worse over time. And I think that honestly, this Dream Eater cycle kind of showcases that. So, bear only, the bear of your worst nightmare cannot attack, damage, or defeat it. If you draw this as the goon, that sucks so much. If you draw it as the seeker, your goon is going to do their job, right? But I don't like the design on this card. I don't like it. I think that this is going to live with the majority of the other enemies where this is bad. And it's mostly just because it adds a level of RNG into a game that is already coated in RNG, right? In a way that I don't think is nice, you know? It's just not good, you know? This Kleptomania can discard with their ability. Yes, that is true. I did say at the beginning that I did not want to talk about fringe cases with this, but that is true. Kleptomania could discard it with their ability. That is true. Yes. But I think that it's a bad card in terms of what it does, and I also don't think the design is that nice. All right, Accursed Follower. This guy's fun. This guy's equal parts annoying, and equal parts cool, and equal parts totally fine. I'm happy when I get him as a basic weakness. Like, what is he gonna do? What's he gonna do? Just, like, make me fail one test? I don't care, brother. I don't care. My numbers get so big that your curse tokens don't matter. Like, if you draw him on turn 1 and never kill him, he's probably going to impact your game in a negative way. However, I think that's ultimately true for the majority of these weaknesses. Like, if you draw internal injury on turn 1 and never get rid of it, you're going to die. But that's on you. And that's the same for Accursed Follower. Like, there should be a time where you'll be at the location with him and you can just kill him. But overall, 1 curse token a turn is probably not going to lose you the campaign, right? This guy's secret power that he's a cultist. That is also kind of poggy. I love that design because it's a little bit like a surprise. It's like, oh, wait, there is a cultist in play. We've been ignoring this guy. And then you get punished for your own hubris, and that's awesome. And I do love that he can fuel curse decks, which is kind of funny. That is kind of enjoyable. Dread Curse. Add 5 curse tokens to the Chaos Bag. I'm not happy to get this. And this one has actually caused me a lot of like misery when I play. But overall, when I draw Dread Curse, I'm like, yeah, this is fine. This is okay. I do think that the Innsmouth weaknesses were probably some of the best like new basic weaknesses. I think that they're really fun. They're really simple. It was like playing with set mechanic in a way that was like elegant and simple, right? No action tax is huge, right? You don't have to spend any of your time to get rid of this. It's basically going to cause you to fail 1 or 2 tests in theory. So like that's where the action tax comes in. But if you buy this and you can play False Covenant or Blasphemous Covenant, just fucking buy it, right? Like just do that. Just grab those and be okay with it, right? This is the reason you cannot see the weakness before building. However, they go against that. They actually are like, just kidding. Just kidding. This one weakness, you get the experience that you can build with after you see it. Just kidding, you know? However, I do think that this might be... I'm sure there's people that'll agree with me on this. But I do think that you actually should be able to see your basic weakness before you start building your deck. I think you should be able to. Mostly because it fits with the ruling they have for offer you can't refuse or whatever it's called. And also because the design on these weaknesses are now starting to get so hyper-specific that you should be able to use that knowledge in your deck building. That's my thought. That's my thought. They either need to make it so you see it in advance, or you do the draw 3, get rid of 1, random of the remaining 2. I feel like it needs that. It needs that. All right, Dread Curse. Great weakness, though. Because it can be crushing, but it also can like be totally fine. Day of Reckoning. Attach Day of Reckoning to the current agenda, then search the Chaos Bag for an Elder Sign token and seal on the Day of Reckoning. So honestly, I'm happy to get this card. I'm happy to get this. It doesn't do anything. It just eats a draw. It just eats a draw. Like, if you get it in Father Mateo, it's a little bit sad. You know, you're like, oh, I was building around Grani the Elder Sign. But it's okay. You'll be fine. I'm happy to see Day of Reckoning. I think it's totally a very passable. Yeah. Day of Reckoning is actually good for Daisy with Necro out. Hell yeah. I was sad to get this in Silas. Yeah, that also suck. But you'll be fine. Like, it only really hurts you when there's like one agenda, right? And that happens occasionally. But I think I'm happy to get this one. I'm never bothered when I see it. I'm never bothered when I draw it. I'm just like, I wish this was a card instead. Boo! I don't like these weaknesses in standalone. I mulligan them in standalone, and I do think that it should not. It's what I was just saying. It should be the reason why there's a change for a change to how basic weaknesses and deck building is approached in this game. Okay, I'm gonna look at all of these as kind of the same thing. So they go in your threat area, and they can be healed if they were single point of damage or horror. So arm injury and leg injury are obviously damage, and panic and stupor are horror. So leg injury is after you take a move, resign, or evade action. You cannot take any of those types of actions for the remainder of the turn. Wow. Okay. Sorry. Arm injury as well. Take a fight or activate. Yep. Yucky. Panic is engage, play, or resource. Parlay, draw, or investigate. So sometimes you get like the one that doesn't matter, and you're like, okay, this is fine, and I can heal it. I do think that notably the leg injury one is probably one that is sneakily the worst. So leg injury is going to go into bad. Removing movement. Can you just imagine you're playing this? Like, you probably put some healing in your deck to once you kind of do this, but then you have to run like healing in your deck, which I don't like. You know, I don't like that, like, I have to run healing to get rid of my weakness. Like, if this was, like, healing or a triple action, right? Let's go. You know, a triple action, let's go. But the healing, I don't want to have to run cards in my deck. Especially when, like, the healing I want to play mostly lives in level 0, right? If I'm a rogue, I can adaptable it in. But I don't want to have to do that for my basic weakness. For my basic weakness, right? But the no moving, but can you just, the no moving and the no move then resign can actually lead to situations where you might actually just lose. Your character might just get killed. Can you imagine? Unspeakable Oath, you're in the bottom of the asylum and you draw this and you're like, well, I'm gonna die, right? Like, I mean, it's all manageable if someone is running healing, but I still think that this one is probably the one that's, like, sneakily really bad. The other one is also probably the fight or activate actions. That one is also probably bad, right? Do you feel that building more economy due to indebted is a more natural way to upgrade in comparison? I mean, like, so with that one, it's less of, like, for building with indebted, it's less like I want to have to play an economy card in my deck. It's just, I won't. It's less like, oh, like, okay, maybe I'll leave in a level 0 economy card. I don't need to add economy to my deck in the same sense. I mean, because also, like, it's easy to get economy. If you really need a resource, take a basic resource action. But there's no basic heal action that exists to solve the problem that this card presents, right? Like, there's a basic action that solves that problem, you know? Darkest Claptrap, 7 months at the Golden Table. Thank you for your continued support. Much appreciated. But I think the fight one's also really bad in the activate, because that can, like, lead you in situations where your goon is like, my arm hurts. I can't punch this guy again. And then we go to Panic, Play, Engage, or Resource. I think... Oh yeah, the diamond pattern between when the basic weaknesses are next to each other is really sick. I think these ones, so this one is Play, Engage, or Resource. Like, it can definitely hurt you, but I don't know if I want to call, like, Parlay, Draw, or Investigate. Investigate's also bad. But the question is Panic... I agree, it's definitely the softest of the three, I think. But is it enough to be on a different tier, right? Because, like, no more can you take a resource action. Like, Panic means you can't... I need one resource to play a card. I'll do it next turn, right? Or I can't, like, play my economy card and then... and then get rid of my panic. I think it's the softest, but I think it all still might live. I think it might still live in here. But I think it's, like, realistically, like, closer to the bottom of this. But we're not doing that by tier. But I think all of these can live in the kind of this is bad tier for me personally, you know? Like, and then you can definitely also, like, these go up and down in value depending on who you are, because I think, like, leg injury, I think that leg injury can be worse if you're a fighter. But I do think with Panic, it basically stops you from, like, playing, like let's look at this, right? So it's your turn, you drew Panic, and you have the healing in hand, but you don't have the resources for it. So you basically waste a turn. Like, you draw cards, which sets you up for future turns. Like, I think it's the weakness, but I still think it does provide you with, like, the resource then play. I don't know. It's close, but I still think it's bad enough. I still think that they're all kind of here, but it's definitely the softest. It would be down here if I was going by tier. Okay. Through the gates. All right, I'm the outlier for this card because this card is actually kind of fun for me. I think this card's actually a really fun basic weakness. Draw the top card of your deck. If it's not a weakness, remove that card from the game. Then search your deck, discard pile, hand, and all play areas for each other copy of the card you own and remove them from the game as well. So if I was just doing this myself, this card would probably be down here. I love this weakness. It makes me laugh every time I draw it. It made me laugh the time I was playing the standalone with Father Mateo and it got rid of my level 5 cards. I thought that was really funny that I built my deck around. That made me laugh. And, but I can't. I have to take my own personal, my own personal feelings away because I love this card. It's so funny and I love it when it absolutely butchers me, right? However, I think it's going to just be fine. Because most of the time, it's not going to hit anything important. But there could be times where it hits something important. But then what does it really do, right? Like, why are you so sad about losing 2 cards in your deck? Right? Like, why are you too sad about putting 2 cards in your deck? It's at its worst, yeah, when it hits an asset card. Especially like if it hits your key ally or your key piece. But it also, but I mean, like, in that case, that's just like the RNG machine, like, doing you a disservice. It also just might, like, you might hit your perception and you're like, oh, okay, I'll get rid of this perception in my deck, you know? It's definitely, I'm not going to pretend that this card's always like a walk in the park, but I think overall, we, by the nature of humans, we are more likely to remember the times that this card hurt us and, like, damaged our soul, as opposed to the time where it did nothing, right? And I will wager that this card does nothing more than it does something, just by the very nature of it. I love this card, though. It makes me laugh every time. I wanted to take away my good cards because it's funny when it does. Okay, we have the 3 unspeakable oaths from Return to Carcosa. So these are campaign mode only. They're peril and they're hidden. And you basically need to do something when it's in your hand. And you can discard it. Otherwise, you lose 2 experience. Losing experience sucks. This is coming from a guy who doesn't care about how much experience I earn. I think the design on these cards aren't great. Because you can just get the wrong one. You know, you can just get the wrong one. Or you can get the one that's like so made for you. So I think I'm going to put all of these as like just as like a general design. Because we have Bloodthirst is you have to deal damage to an enemy in excess of its remaining health. The successfully investigate a location with no clues. And evade an enemy at your location, right? And I think that it's just kind of, they're just kind of not great design, you know? They're kind of like feeling, why do they have a red line around them? You guys all seeing that shit? Why do they have this red line around them? Evade is the worst IMO? I can agree with that. I hate evading on a good day. Making me do it twice. But I think I'm going to put these all in the kind of, just assuming, I'm going to put on the this is bad tier. Like, really? I'm going to be honest. Losing 2 experience is not the end of the world. If you lose it multiple times, that sucks. Like if this was like capped, where it was like, you know, if there was like 2 versions of this where it's like you earn 2 for your experience, and then like the next one is if you do it, you like gain 2 experience. I think that could be a fun little dichotomy that, you know, like it's like a fun little push for it, right? Imagine being skids and just getting 0 XP. That would be funny. But, it is, they're just kind of bad design, you know? Like, there should be some sort of, like, control for it. Tree hands! Otherwise known as Leo Anderson's signature weakness. So Dendromorphosis takes up your hand slots. Put Dendromorphosis into play in your threat area. Cannot leave playable, has no damage on it. Has a lightning bolt. Take 1 direct damage. Deal 1 damage to Dendromorphosis. Like, losing your hand slot sucks. Losing your hand slot sucks. The flavor on this card is really fun, though, and there's a lot of great jokes that come from it. But a weakness that, like, can just, like... There's some people where it doesn't hit at all, right? Is it too easy if they return to your hand like straitjacket? No, I don't think so. I think it should do that. I think that it should, right? 1 health soak is kind of nice if you're a book investigating your hand slots or just win more slots. Yeah, but I think that's the sign of a bad weakness, IMO. Like, I think this kind of sits into the thing where I think that targeted basic weaknesses like this kind of thing where it's like we eat the hand slots are bad. You know? It's like the unspeakable oaths. Like, weaknesses... Like, basic weaknesses should be broad and has the potential to affect everybody equally, right? In the sense of what they do. And it's just the honest truth that hand slots are not equal among the classes, right? Like, I would rather have overzealous every day of the week in this card in a guardian. Like, you know? If I'm a seeker, I'm happy to get Dendromorphosis. And I think that's, like, why it's hard to rate basic weaknesses. I think overall, though, once again, I'm kind of looking at, like, the general worst-case scenario. And if this can cause you to lose 2 cards and roughly 3 or 4 resources, that sucks. So I'm going to put this in that this is bad. I think there are a lot of cases where the card's just kind of fine, right? But it's hard to talk about basic weaknesses in the broad sense and how scary they are, right? Because of how different they are for each investigator. This card has ruined 3 Leo decks, which is insane that it's happened 3 times, right? But yeah, not a fan of this card on the design side or on, I think it's like it sits between bad and fine. Offer you can't refuse. Campaign mode only. When you become the bearer of this weakness, gain 2 experience. Lose 5 resources on a revelation if you cannot remove offer you can't refuse. Then does it become like 7 and 10? And on the last one you die if you can't? Is it something like... What are the numbers on the upgraded ones? Because I've actually... I'll be honest, I've never lost on this one. I've never had to pay. I've never had to pay on the first... I've never had to, like, upgrade. I think this card is super manageable. You just have to play with, like, half a brain to be like, okay, I need my 5 is the new 0, right? And then when you see it, you're like, I will spend all of my money. But I don't think that's like a fun gameplay loop, particularly, right? How many XP would Doom need to give to balance similarly? 5. Yeah, I'd say at least 5. It needs to give you a 5 experience card. Yeah. Sucks if you get this, you wanted to do Dark Horse. Hell yeah, agreed. There's a lot of times where it sucks. But I think, like, it also, like, sucks if you get it in the wrong, with the wrong class, right? Like, you get this in the right class and you'll be able to manage it. But now, and actually, in all fairness, all class has, like, good economy at this point now, that resources are, like, a lot more manageable. I think I am going to put this in the this is bad tier. Because, like, it's... You can play around this card pretty easily, right? Like, you have to do a bit of, like, forward thinking. But I think that it's like for me personally, I'm happy to see this card. I'll gladly take this weakness, right? But I respect that it does warp things, and certain classes will have to manage it a bit harder, so it kind of lives in the similar spot as these. But I'm a fan of Offer You Can't Refuse. I enjoy playing with it. Which is probably not a good sign for a basic weakness, but knowing that there are people that hate this card, that probably is a good sign that I enjoy it then. Damned. Permanent. Before setting up each game, draw a random card from the tarot deck and place it in front of you in the reverse position. Each other investigator ignore its effects. Wait, this is actually fun. Wait a minute. This is a fun, random basic weakness. Yeah, this card's actually fun. I would play a version of this if it was a card that I can put into my deck that gave me a positive and a negative. I would love the hell out of it, right? It's like, it's just a great time. Like, I know we have Observed for the positive side of it, but I would take like a level 2 card that gave me 1 positive and 1 negative. Like, it gave me 2 and I made 1 positive and 1 negative. I would play the hell out of that. It's a fun card. It's a fun basic weakness. I love the hell out of it. I love Damned. Great card. Once again, this plays with set mechanic really well. And I think that's like what we kind of want from basic weaknesses, right? Right? Good card. Fun card. Lots of fun. I like it. The Devil. You cannot play assets other than Devil while it's in your opening hand. If the Devil is drawn in your opening hand during setup, you cannot replace it. It must stay in your opening hand. This card's absolutely awful. I hate this card. It does so many things, and it... Worse than the Tower? How many skill cards? How many skill cards do you need to commit? Like, it's... This card stops you, right? Turn 1 is when you want to play assets. If this is in your opening hand, you have lost so much tempo, right? You've lost so much tempo on the game. If this card was you can only play 1 asset while this is in your hand, this card would be probably on par with the Tower. But this is an absolutely awful card. If it's in your opening hand, congratulations. You're going to be on the back foot. You're losing 3 resources. You basically got an indebted, and you lose an action on your first turn. Wild. Tough card. Tough card. It's like indebted, it also costs a card. An action and a resource. Yep. Definitely die from Tower and stuff like Rotting Remains. Never die from being able to play an asset on turn 1. I mean, I suppose that's fine, but I mean, like, at the same time, why haven't you played your Tower if you need to commit your skill cards? Because notably, like, you can see this coming. Like, you see this on turn 1 and you're just like, ugh. Like, if Tower's in your hand and you're losing because of it, gave the resources, play the Tower, you know? It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough basic weakness. It can absolutely, like, Bryn, I'm pretty sure would always take Overzealous over the Devil. I would most times too now. Okay, we're on the Scarlet Keys in basic weaknesses. Still don't know how I feel about a lot of these. I think it was a nice attempt, but I think overall these were kind of a miss. They feel like a miss, you know? So, Lurk in the Dark, 3/2/1. Guardian Investigator only, Hunter, spawn any connecting location. Lurk in the Dark can only be attacked or damaged using weapon assets or tactic events and takes 1 fewer damage from each source. I'm telling you, Fantasy Flight, you gotta let us put the basic weaknesses in our deck before we build. You have to do it. You gotta. You gotta let us start doing that. You know? Just house rule it? I can't house rule it. I make content on the internet for the game. If I house rule it, people are going to be like, as soon as I start doing house rules, people are going to just start being like, what the fuck are you doing in this video? Like, we're in a position where as content creators, we got to play by the rules, right? And I can't house rule it. This needs to come from an official source. If they're going to do designs like this, they need to do this, right? I think that this card, it reads very manageable, but I've already heard a lot of horror stories from people getting, like, punched by this card, you know? I wish I could house rule it, trust me. Or man, I definitely wish I could. Because I would in a heartbeat. At least it only deals 1 damage. Yeah, no, like, the numbers on it are really manageable. And I think they overall, like, succeeded with the idea of making them not crazy scary for the most part. But I still think that they kind of, like, whiffed it a little bit, you know? I think, though, that this lives in here. Because, can you imagine you're at this location, and you're connected to locations, and there's 2 people here, and you draw it in the middle of your turn. And you're like... The other thing that I think with basic weaknesses, where you can tell how scary they are, is will you take an action? Will you take your final action to draw a card if you haven't seen that weakness yet? And with this one, the answer is probably no, because it's going to punch a teammate, most likely, right? It also is sometimes yes, but I think generally this card can lead to bad, not good. And then it can sometimes just punish your people. As D. Scarpack said, this really should be bearer only. It really should, right? Just this lurker in the dark. Love the art, though. The art's really cool. All right, Quantum Paradox. A 0-cost event. Seeker only. As initial cost to play Quantum Paradox, you must choose and discard 4 other cards from your hand. Whew! If it's in your hand at the end of your turn, reveal it and take a horror. Alright, I actually haven't played with this card, so this one's kind of hard for me to look at. It seems tough. Has anyone played with it? Has anyone actually played with this card that has, like, some experience they want to give me? This is even worse than I originally thought from reading. It's basically, like a read the signs in a way. Like drawing the sign. Card is bad, even in big hand. It does nothing. You never want to lose 4 cards. Nobody from later days. I took a lot of horror from it, trying to ignore it. Yeah, I mean, like, losing 5 cards is a lot of... Well, 4, but 5 including it. Seekers also have a lot of horror. So you just get Pete Sylvester or some horror soak. It's basically no big deal. I mean, that only really works for Min and Rex, right? Yeah, I wish I had some experience with this one, because I haven't actually seen it in action. Like, it has a lot, like, you have a lot of horror that you can soak in that pool, but then that, like, eats up everything else. If it does nothing, then your deck did nothing. Lamal, astute on sparks. You're a philosopher. That is really funny. I think I'm going to put it in the this is bad tier, though. Just on, like, my gut feeling for this card. Losing 5 of your resource, like 5 cards from your hand, going back to Amnesia, it's on kind of like a drawing the sign level. There might be times where you just don't get it, right? And you're like, you draw on like the last 2 turns and you're like... But like, if you ever have to resolve this twice in a campaign, in a scenario, if you have to resolve it twice in a campaign, congratulations, you won. If you have to resolve it twice in a scenario, you know, Yeah. Cool card. I like the design, but I think, once again, this one's kind of like, it's a little bit spooky. Makes it worse than drawing the signs that nobody can house with it? Hell yeah. Agreed. 100%. It might even be up here, but I think I'm going to put it down here just because I don't have enough experience with it yet. Okay. The Rogue one. Pay your due. 10 cost. Rogue Investigator only. Additional cost to play, pay your due. You may spend any number of additional actions. Reduces cost by 5 for each additional action spent. If pay your due is in your hand at the end of your turn, reveal it and take 1 damage. So, you either spend an action, pay 10. You spend 2 actions, pay 5. You spend 3 actions, it's gone. Pay 0. I've seen a bit of this experience, but I'd love to once again go to my wonderful chat, and I want to read if you have any experience with pay your due. Take the damage each turn. Rogues have a lot of soak for the most part. I can see this card being worst with, like, bad for someone like Safina, but she's still, like, has an okay damage pool. Or is she 5'9"? Is Safina 5'9"? Or is she 6'8"? Yeah, losing 3 actions is rough, but rogues do get a lot of actions. Yeah, she's 5'9". So yeah, it's scary in Safina for sure. But I mean, like, you're going to find a turn to do it, right? Lonnie fuel? Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Lonnie, do you want to keep fixing this jacket for me while I also play with my something that gives me horror? I think this one is kind of just fine. Because, I mean, like, worst case, I don't know. I just feel like this one's fine. Just a 3 action clear, or 2 action and 5 resources. But I mean, I have Paranoia in bad. But I mean, like, I also like I can take. I'm a rogue. I can probably do this. I can probably do it. I could be wrong on this. I could be wrong, but I think that this one makes me feel like it's fine. Yeah, Paranoia hits you immediately. This one, you get to lose the resources when you want, right? 10, the perfect loan amount. I like that thinking. I like that thinking. Ectoplasmic Horror. So, elephant in the room. I'm going to ask again, as I always do. Has this card been ruled? Do we know exactly how this works yet? It's March 10th. It's Mario Day, and no one knows how this card works? Yeah. All right, Ectoplasmic Horror, 2/2/2, Mystic only, Hunter. The first time you reveal a Chaos token while attacking or attempting to evade Ectoplasmic Horror, reveal an additional token for each empty Arcane slot you have. Why can't they just send an email and say how it works? Why can't they do that? All right, chat. Let's, what's the confusion? Oh, Darkest Claptrap. You ready? So when, is it the first time you attack at a turn, each turn, or ever? Because, it's split probably like 40-40-20. Like, there's a lot of first times that can exist in the game. I always thought it was the first time every turn. Oh, they ruled on Brandica Thugga? Oh, let's go. What was it? Well, potentially. It's a thing. What do you think it was? I would love to know. Yeah, because, like, it's either no damage. Wild. Call on the play? No damage. That's crazy. I think it should deal damage. First time you ever play this card as a player? First time every attack to me, be most brutal. Thought it was the first time every attack evade. See, it's wild that this exists, doesn't it? I wouldn't get too attached to the rules, though, because sometimes rules change. I think that this card is ultimately still just fine. right? It's ultimately still just fine. I think no matter what, I think it's still just kind of okay. I think it becomes harder to kill if it's the first time ever. You know? I think it's just kind of like I wish this card was better worded. But I think overall it's just kind of fine. Yeah, and a Mystic it's very easy to manage. I do like that they put it in the I mean obviously like it works against Amina, and she can definitely handle this, no problem. She doesn't need to stress at all about this thing when she has empty arcane slots, right? Especially if it's for first every test. You know? That's the thing, right? Like, to me, my reading of it, just because, like, from, like, a design from game perspective, like, game design perspective, how I look at ectoplasmic horror is a basic weakness threshold should be 2 actions, right? So for me, it was the first time you reveal it, you're going to fail your test, and you're like, damn. Then you just kill it for your second action. So it's like a 2-action weakness to clear in design theory. However, everyone's right with how they read it, because it all makes sense, doesn't it? It all makes sense. All right. Underprepared, otherwise known as the Oops Boys Get Revenge. It's a 1-cost event. It's a blunder. Survivor only. Play only if underprepared is the only card in your hand and you have exactly 1 resource in your resource pool. While underprepared is in your hand, each card you commit to a skill test is considered to have 1 fewer matching skill icon. I've played with this card. I hate this card. This is... this is like a deck-altering weakness, right? It's manageable. It's very manageable. But it basically just... turns off what the survivors want to do, right? Which is scrap. They want to be scrappy, you know? I don't think it deserves to be in that this is absolutely awful, because you can still commit the cards, right? You can still commit the cards. You can still do it. However, like, the idea of survivor investigators is that they get by on their low values by committing cards to it. Like, committing cards to their tests, right? And, like, yeah, it's so much worse than when... Yeah, a basic weakness shouldn't really be worse than a signature one, right? DSB Board, thank you so much for the follow on the goddamn table. I don't think it's awful. I think it's bad. I think it's a bad weakness. Like, it sucks to draw. I do not like playing with this card. And it's also, like, hard to get rid of, man. Like, if you basically don't get rid of this, like, the turn or 2 after you draw it, it's going to be with you for the rest of the game. Probably. And it just basically makes all, you know... Like, if it was just skill cards, I think this card should really only affect skill cards. But it affects every card, right? It should just only be skill cards. So if I want to spend an asset to get 2 book, like a newspaper, and get 2 book on a test, I should be able to with this card. Because that's what survivors need sometimes. I do not like this weakness. I think that, once again, this goes back to my point where I'm okay if they stop putting basic weaknesses in decks, you know? But skill cards often do things in addition to icons, so you want to commit them anyways. Yeah, and that's good. I think that's good, because if it's just skill cards, you're basically playing a Haunted, right? You basically get, like, 1 less to your skill that you would have had otherwise. But it means that It means that in the process of trying to get down to 0 cards, you need either to play your assets or commit cards to skill tests that do nothing, right? So, like, it's one of those things where, yeah, like, Silas is never getting rid of this card. It's going to live with Silas forever. I think that this is just not great from a design standpoint in terms of what a basic weakness started as to what a basic weakness has become, right? Like, we compare Amnesia, which I think is a fantastic basic weakness. Just choose and discard all but 1 card from your hand. This, in design theory, affects all investigators evenly. All investigators are going to want cards in their hand, right? This one, not so much. This one, not so much. This one, like, I mean, the rogue one's definitely probably the closest of the 5. Yeah. Self-destructive. See, also, again, alright, put self-destructive into play in your threat area. When you deal 1 or more damage to an enemy, take 1 damage. Discard self-destructive as a double action. At least the stuff like this, where, like, you get this as a seeker, right? You get this as a seeker and you're like, yes! I remember I got this in my Cycle My Deck Amanda. It's Cycle My Deck Amanda deck I played. And I was just like, that's great. This is basically an indebted once I draw it. It's just there and it does nothing. Most of the time, I'm happy to get this. So I'm actually going to put this in the I'm happy to get this tier. If you're a goon, get rid of it. Right? Get rid of it. Or get your seeker to get rid of it so you can kill something. Right? I think it does nothing. On the inverse, I think this card is great weakness design. Obsessive. Put Obsessive into your play area, into your threat area. When your turn begins, discard 1 non-weakness card at random from your hand as a double action, discard Obsessive. I think that overall, this is a very unassuming weakness, right? Where you're like, yeah, I can survive Obsessive for a turn. And then you don't clear it because you're like, I can survive another turn. And then you're like, wait a minute. I've now discarded 5 cards to my Obsessive to the point where now Obsessive is kill on sight. I think it's a great weakness design, right? Can you imagine this one in True Solo? I don't want to imagine that. Discard back. That sounds like an actual nightmare. Like, that sounds like, that's like your worst nightmare. I am, however, I'm gonna give this card the respect it deserves. Okay? Okay? I'm not putting it in this is fine. I'm putting this card in this is bad because it's a kill on sight. And to me, a kill on sight is a bad basic weakness in terms of how much you want to get rid of it. Most of the time, this card's just fine, right? Because you just spend 2 actions to get rid of it, right? But I'm going to give this card the respect it deserves. I'm putting it up here. I'm respecting the hell out of this card. And you might be wondering, isn't it very similar to Internal Injury and Chronophobia? Cards are more important than your health or sanity. Or your health or sanity. You'll be fine. You'll be fine if you take 2 damage, right? You ain't going to be fine if you're discarding 2 random cards, probably. It's going to hurt you a lot more than 2 damage will. I think you need, like basically 2 internal injury triggers are about on par with an Obsessive in a vacuum, right? End of turn versus beginning of turn is very different too. Hell yeah, discard back. That's why I love having Chad here, you know? I think most of the time, Obsessive is totally okay. It's going to eat 1 card, and you're going to get rid of it. But I'm sure most people have been in a situation where you're like, I've lost a card to Obsessive. I can lose a few more. And then suddenly you're like, why have I discarded, like, why is my hand empty? Scratching into the game, disorder, revised and dunnage. Very good content. Keep it up. Thank you. Much appreciated. I have no plans of stopping unless I die. Which could be whenever, you know, that's life, right? All right. Reckless. Commit only to a skill test you're performing that of any type That has no other cards committed to it. Other cards cannot be committed to the skill test. If this test fails, return the skill to your hand. If it's at the hand of your end of your turn, reveal it and lose 2 resources. Yo, I'm happy to get this card, right? Like, this card's, like, probably the softest basic weakness in the game. Right? It's gotta be, right? This has gotta be the easiest basic weakness, right? Because every investigator can pass a test. Except for maybe Preston. Or Kelvin, if you get it early. I can see that being a case. But I think overall, I'm happy to get this. Like, every time, if I get this, except a goon without an enemy, that is a fair point. What do you do if you're a goon without an enemy? I know what you do. You play your assets. You play the stuff. You play the stuff that you want to spend your money on. That's probably it, right? Can be real drain if you fail the reckless test more than once. That is true, but I don't think it makes this weakness that much worse. Yeah, no, I'm happy with this. I'm happy to get Reckless. Every time I see Reckless, I'm like, oh, congratulations, Justin. You just won the campaign. Nihilism. I love this card. This is another... I think this one is also... This one and Atichophobia are also 2 great. I think overall, apart from Self-Destructive, I do think that... Self-Destructive and probably Reckless, I do think they nailed with these ones. By the way, what is the best duo combo for my friend who wants to play Rex? Which should I pick? Zoe! Zoe Samaras. Zoe is a very good Rex pair. You'll have a great time. I love this card. Put Nihilism into play in your threat area. After you reveal, cancel, or ignore an autofail token, take a damage and a horror. As a double action, discard Nihilism. This card's hilarious because, I mean, like, let's be real. Okay, we're all going to be honest, right? This card is just fine, right? Like, this card, you just get rid of it, you know? But it traps you. This card traps you because you are like, this card does nothing. And then, suddenly you're like, why am I dead? Right? Like, why am I going to die? Oh, it's because of this nihilism. And I think that's great design. But overall, this card's fine. This card, honestly, for me, is also pretty much close to I'm happy to get this. But I'm going to also give it the respect that it deserves. Where it should live up here. After you draw your first, I'll tell you, like, well, I'm not going to draw another one. And then you do. Amen. Amen. But yeah, I think overall this card, I'm happy to get this in my deck, but I'm going to give it the bump up a tier. Just clear it out. Diana's like the only immediate use 2 actions besides maybe Jacqueline. Obsessive is worse than this? Obsessive is so much. This card does nothing. This card does nothing. Obsessive already, like on the same situation, you draw Nihilism. You clear it out next turn. Nothing happened. Obsessive, you draw Obsessive, you lost a card. So already it's like slightly above, just 1 tier above, right? Like I said, this I view each of these are down 1 tier, right? Like Obsessive is in this is fine. Nihilism is in I'm happy to get this, but I'm going to bump them both up a tier because to give them the respect they deserve, because they each deserve that respect because they're both unassuming, right? They're both unassuming. Speaking of unassuming, we also got our last weakness, which is the Tichophobia. Putting Tichophobia into play in your threat area. After you fail a skill test, take 1 horror, double action, discard it. Great card. Great design. I love the hell out of it. I think this one... I mean, I think it's worse than Nihilism, so I'm going to put it up here. I can't tell you how many times I've ignored this card. And how many times I've taken 2 more horror than I should have. Right? It sits in the same boat where it's kind of unassuming. It's definitely less unassuming than the other two. But it's... You're going to leave it. I've left it. You've probably left it, right? You probably left it. Like, someone's also has just let this sit around for a while, right? Someone in chat, back me up. You've also just left this hanging out for a bit, right? Because you're like, I don't fail tests. I'm testing up 5. I'm never going to fail, right? I do think that it's worse than nihilism because it's more likely to trigger, right? But I think this one also is deserved to kind of be a kill on sight, you know? Not to the sense of obsessive. Like, so this is how it goes, right? Like, I have 3 turns. Obsessive, turn after I draw it. Atychophobia, second turn after I draw it. Nihilism, usually third turn after I draw it. But I think they're all much scarier than they let on. Okay. Let's look at this tier list. Let's see if we want to make any changes. Wait, this is actually fun. Yes. Happy to get this. Happy to see all those. I tell the goon to clear all these out for me. The joy of being the clue getter. I often leave Atychophobia up for the entire game. Same. Same. I don't think I should. I don't think we should, but I often do, yes. And then suddenly I'm at a stress point that I could have easily avoided by just spending 2 actions. Once again, I think this one's still kind of down here. It's still kind of like close to the bottom. Yeah, I think this is for my level, outside of my own bias and kind of just like looking at the card as a whole. Like, just looking at them all, I think this is pretty alright. Like I said, basic weaknesses are hard to kind of gauge. Yeah, I'm happy with this. Oh, that was fun. Longer than I thought, too. 90 minutes. But now I get to eat lunch. Yay! I'll ask all the viewers who are watching this on YouTube, do you have any fun stories of when things went absolutely crazy for you because of that is kind of just went bad because of a basic weakness? I'd love to hear the stories because the stories are what makes this game fun. In the meantime, if you want to support the channel, you can do so by liking, commenting, subscribing, or by joining our Patreon. We have you can see over all those acolytes, all those cool acolytes over there at the $3 US a month tier to get access to our Patreon and see a bunch of cool stuff. Also, huge thank you, of course, to the wizards and the knights who get even cooler stuff. Sweet. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, a GG's.